of Vadodara Physician Association, sir. And as per the agenda, we will schedule, sir. And our first presentation is from a very renowned consulting physician, Dr. Jayesh Tripathi. So I welcome, sir. And sir, hand over to you, sir. Please, you can proceed.
Thank you very much, friends, today for asking me to talk after many months personally with the FPA members. All these years, I have had the longest association of one-to-one relationship with FPA members. And today, thanks to JB, I am back in the groove again, talking to FPA members after 4 to 5 months. It's a great pleasure. Of course, I'll be missing the warmth, the touch, and the interaction one-to-one with the friends. But I hope that we can convert this into an interactive session in the end when we have a small question and answer session. I'll begin with one or two cases. 32-year-old boy, non-smoker, no family history, no angina, no hypertension, no diabetes, no lipids, very active, regular gymmer. Suddenly comes with breathlessness about 2.5 months back. He's taken to a hospital. The troponin I is negative. Patient has got a heart rate of 160 and a pressure of 96/66, saturation of 82, acutely breathless, put on a ventilator. Looks like myocarditis, acute. That is the time when COVID had just begun. And I got a message that should we get that COVID testing done? It is our protocol in that cardiology institute. I said, yes, surely, you must get it done. So they said, we'll keep the patient in isolation. So they kept the patient in isolation and did the COVID. COVID was strongly positive. This is one of the first manifestations. Early, in a young person, no risk factors. Patient comes with COVID and in this pandemic, but the presentation is classic cardiac, myocarditis, acute viral myocarditis. Another person, 45-year-old, vague chest pain, increases on walking and climbing the first story, showing usual anterolateral T wave changes. So I call the patient in the evening, tell him to rest for the day, give him aspirin, clopidogrel. Patient is about 50. Patient is a diabetic. Call him in the evening, the T changes, the T waves have deepened. I say, I think it looks like that this looks like angina. And because you're still having pain, looks like very unstable. So please go to a cardiology place and get yourself checked. Same thing, the other cardiology institute also does the same thing. They say, sir, we keep in isolation, do a COVID before we think of an angio. And they do a COVID and COVID is positive. Because he's a diabetic, he's not getting chest pain, but COVID has triggered thrombotic event. They keep the patient on conservative management for 10 days, keep him standby ready for an angio anytime. After a fortnight, they do an angio. The patient has got an LAD 95% lesion in the territory with the ECG was showing. So these are the two very interesting clinical cases that I came across in the last 2.5, 3 months. And after that, when we started knowing about this, there has been a series of data and things which are coming. So in these times of COVID, cardiology and hypertension, patients having 210/120 BP suddenly out of the blue, well maintained, well controlled on medication, suddenly shoot up with some low grade fever. You realize patient has got COVID and hypertension has gone haywire. So these are the various presentations that we are getting very regularly. Next slide, please. So what are the cardiovascular manifestations and clinical course in COVID-19? Pathophysiological mechanisms, triage systems for patients distribution, diagnosis of cardiovascular conditions, hypertension management, use of RAS blockers and summary. Let me put in a word for triage management. Triage management in English is defined as something setting up a priority of 1, 2, 3. That means if a patient comes to me with an acute chest pain, hypotension, profusely sweating, ECG shows acute MI, then my first method of triage is to do his basic minimum test and take him for an angio, for a primary angioplasty or a primary angiography, and followed by whatever is needed. So then the other management, then the secondary management. Here in COVID, the things will change. In COVID, what is going to happen is now every day, the triage is first evaluate. Is it COVID? Is it non-COVID? So it is all about prioritization of what you do first and what you do second and what you do third. And you divide, stratify the risk and then accordingly move. So what are the cardiovascular manifestations? They are all associated with MI damage, myocardial damage, elevated troponin I, cardiac arrhythmias, elevated long-term risk, because once you get a cardiac involvement, certain muscle fibers, either because of ischemia or myocarditis, are likely to suffer, and LV function and EF will reduce, and possible long-term effects on lipid and glucose metabolism. Next. Myocardial injury and increased levels of biomarkers are likely associated with infection-induced myocarditis. So what are you looking at? ESR, CRP, IL-6, D-dimer. These are all LDH, all the direct procalcitonin. We are looking at all these markers when a patient walks in these days to evaluate depending on the patient's clinical condition. We might need 2 of these tests. We might need all the 6 or 10 of them. We might go for the coagulation cascade. But these are the situations where viral infections will cause direct vascular infection, pro-inflammatory increase, hypercoagulability, sympathetic stimulation, acute respiratory distress syndrome, and all the direct indirect effects of this will come on the heart and the vascular system, causing vascular inflammation. It will cause a pre-existing plaque to rupture, increase the MI demand, more demand, myocardial depression, poor pumping, all ultimately leading to myocardial infarction, cardiac failure, or sudden arrhythmias. So these are the 3 terminal events which will happen because of a cascade of the above events. Which one will come first in which patient is very difficult to predict. So to understand clinically in our practice, let us make it clear. Today's time, patient comes with chest pain, ECG normal, not normal. If ECG normal, repeat ECG in 24 to 48 hours if the pain persists. If there is a change, ask for a troponin I, CRP, hemogram. Immediately send him for a 2D echo. If the patient is looking that there is a myocardial involvement or the troponin is involved, admit the patient, isolate the patient, and let the cardiologist get a COVID done and then plan the next day. These are the basic information. Next. You can see that there's a large study from Wuhan where 400 patients and patients who had cardiac injury, there was a much higher risk of death. So definitely cardiac now injury is a very important part of the COVID management. In today's times, let us understand very clearly, if you have learned or have knowledge for COVID, your 90% of medicines is covered. The rest 10% you don't need to know. So whoever comes to you, think about COVID. Set your mindset, at least for the coming 3 to 6 months, think about COVID. Whether it is respiratory system, whether it is cardiovascular, whether it is renal, whether it is hematuria, whether it is septic infection, please think of skin manifestations also. Think of COVID first. Rule out, once COVID ruled out, then start looking for other things. So it is important that in pandemic, which is on such a large scale worldwide, we have to keep our eyes and ears open on everyday patient symptomatology in COVID. Next. The various mechanisms are SARS-CoV-2 binds host receptor ACE to mediate entry into the cells. ACE is highly expressed in lungs, heart, and vessels. These are the 3 main things. So this is likely to involve dysregulation of the RAS and the ACE system due to SARS-CoV-2 infection. CVD may be a primary phenomenon or a secondary. If there is first lung involved, there will be pulmonary hypertension, there will be back pressure changes, and there will be myocarditis. So there could be a pulmonary embolism. There could be so many things happening parallelly. And it is very, very difficult to differentiate each one of them separately. So let us now understand. Again, I repeat, think of COVID, look for COVID, rule out COVID, and then the next step. Next. What happens to the cardiovascular system? There's an increased cardiac workload, there is a immune system activation, there is plaque instability, and there are acute coronary events, as I said. Of course, the later stage or the critical stage is the cytokine release storm. By that time, most of the things are very, very late. And it gets very difficult to hold your horses. Let us leave that to the intensivist and the consultant who is treating. At our level, we need to understand mild to moderate cardiac involvement. Let us keep our eyes and ears open. Next. There is a critical role of ACE2 in regulation of viral invasion. These are the pathways. I will not go into detail because these slides must have been shown enough number of times. It works directly for viral infection, replication and multiplication, and also it directly affects the cardiac myocytes and depresses them. So it works both ways. Next. Angiotensin converting enzyme 2 is a functional receptor for the SARS. So moment that receptor is involved, there is rapid multiplication and rapid deterioration of patients of COVID. Next. Again, this is a very complicated slide, but to make it short, let us understand that the three things, acute coronary syndrome, heart failure, and myocarditis and arrhythmia, are all as a result of CARS invasion directly, indirectly on the myocardial tissue, on the vessels, on the endothelial cells, leading to fulminant myocarditis, myocardial damage, endothelial damage, coronary artery damage, microvasculature damage. So this will all result in this, what you see on the gray, ACS, cardiac failure, myocarditis, arrhythmia. Next. As I said, triad system means you give high priority to patients with COVID-19 infection, may compromise rapid triage of non-COVID patients with cardiovascular. What does this mean? So these days we have to give. We might sometimes compromise the non-COVID patients, but for COVID, as a routine, we have to treat non-COVID patients also if there is an acute MI, unstable MI, which you need to treat. COVID test may take 6 hours, 8 hours, 2 hours to come. Well, you have to treat, but then you have to take priority precautions. That means that OT will have to be fully sterilized, it will have to be fumigated, it will have everybody in that place. Retrospectively, if you realize, everybody will have to wear a PPE, everybody will have to do the whole, we can't use that cath lab immediately. So there are a lot of hassles. You don't want to compromise on the patients, but nor do you want to compromise on the staff, nor do you want to compromise on the cath lab or cardiac setup. So we normally first try to as quickly get hold of COVID as far as possible. So that proper triad setting is important. It favors right in hospital allocation beds on infective status and allows prompt adoption of protective measures both by HCP and by patients, healthcare professionals. Acute cardiac patients assessing intensive cardiac care unit or cath lab is a fast track fashion should be considered as likely positive patients until they are not proved infective. Next. So what is the system in an emergency? Rearrangement of emergency department is mandated to separate suspected from non-suspected. Local protocols, as I said, the 2-3 patients initially which I saw, the cardiac centers were prepared with their own protocol that, sir, we will isolate the patient first. We will ask for a COVID. We will maintain them hemodynamically. We will give them as much support. We will be prepared to do an angio if there is an emergency need. But first we will rule that out. So setting up the prioritization. And patients with mild stable disease should normally be treated conservatively. There is no hurry to do an angio or do this or that or any surgery. So be very sure about this. Next. So this is the algorithm, as I have said, no COVID, separate out depending on mild, moderate. Next. Diagnosis of cardiovascular conditions. Next. chest pain, dyspnea, cardiogenic shock, as I've already talked. Next. The slide shows that how quickly it progresses from 6th, 7th day onwards. By the time you admit, normally the patients will get positive after 5 to 7 days of infection, which Dr. Anand Marathe will tell you. But from 7th day, by the 6th, 7th day, you realize you admit a patient with mild to moderate symptoms. 8th day is dyspneic, 9th day is ARDS, and 10th day is in the ICU on a ventilator. So it is a very rapid, fulminant, cascading course. It doesn't give you time. One of the things that has happened now is HRCT, at HRCT. So now another protocol that has been set up is, before you admit to a cardiac care unit, most people are getting an HRCT to know the level, whether we can take this patient in. Do we have a ICU bed and do we have a ventilator to treat that patient? If the patient has shown on HRCT a significant amount of ground glass appearance, if they don't have a bed, they are telling no. It is becoming more and more difficult, because from the 7th day onwards to the 10th, it becomes so rapidly fulminant that it becomes very difficult. In spite of giving everything, it doesn't come around. So this is one more thing that has been added in the protocol. Next. So if there is shock, you have to treat as infected, confirm COVID diagnosis, but always fully covered with PPE, sanitization, fumigation, everything to be done. Next. Out of cardiac arrest, hospital arrest, pulse leg activity, treat them as you normally would treat. Normally would have an arrhythmia, or you have a bradyarrhythmia, you treat same way you treat. Next. Now, very important, hypertension management. There is a lot of hue and cry. Hypertension is very common in older people. Older age is more important risk factor for even COVID. So high frequency of hypertension would be expected in older patients, particularly systolic with severe infection. Higher frequency of hypertension would be expected in older COVID patient, 19 patients. Next. So what do? If you have a self-isolated patient, continue the same treatment. No need to change anything, except that the pressure is fluctuating too much. It's going too low or too high. Then consult your doctor and accordingly adjust the medication in hypertensive patients who are self-isolated for COVID at home. Those who are in the hospital and have mild to moderate symptoms, unless hypotensive, mild means they don't need oxygen, they are maintained at room air around 95, 94 maximum. Unless hypotensive or there is an acute kidney injury, continue hypertension, including ACE and ARBs. Keep monitoring the arrhythmias, check plasma potassium, because hypokalemia with ACE and ARBs with a diuretic is a very common phenomena. So keep checking potassium in house hospital. That is a set protocol today in all cardiology institutes. Next. What about RAS blockers? We suggest that patients with cardiac disease, hypertension or diabetes who are treated with ACE2 increasing drugs are at higher risk for severe COVID infection and therefore should be monitored for ACE modulating medications such as ACE or ARBs. So are patients with hypertension and diabetes at risk, increased risk for COVID infection? Yes, they are at increased risk. But if the patient is home quarantined or if the patient has mild symptoms, you don't need to stop ACE or ARBs. Now there are plenty of guidelines. Next. So this is the chart showing antihypertensive treatment with ACE and ARBs. And you look at the adjusted odd ratios. Next. Odd ratios for COVID-19 is associated with use of antihypertensive drugs dispensed as monotherapy or combination. Neither monotherapy nor combination therapy showed a higher risk for COVID. Supposing somebody is not taking these medications, somebody is taking and both have got COVID, there is no major difference in both the groups. Both of them are almost same, and it is not necessary that these drugs will cause COVID, or if they are given in mild patients would worsen COVID. So let us be very comfortable on this thought. Next. The European Society has given guidelines that patients with hypertension should apply the same precautions as subjects to the same category and with the same profile of comorbidities. So you look at the patient, you look at the comorbidity, that is the most important thing. Next. The Council of Hypertension in ESC has strongly recommended that physicians and patients should continue treatment with their usual antihypertensive therapy because there is no clinical or scientific evidence to suggest that treatment with ACE or ARB should be discontinued because of COVID-19. This is a statement as recent as 1.5 to 2 months back. So this puts to doubt all the doubts that stop antihypertensive, stop ACE, stop anybody. You need to stop them once patient gets into the moderate mode. That means the oxygen saturation beyond 4 liters you need. Oxygen saturation drops on 4 liters of oxygen. Patient needs BiPAP, patient needs to be in the ICU. Then please stop ACE and ARBs. Next. Or potassium is disturbed. So the independent predictors of in-hospital death from multivariable factors. And receiving ACE is nowhere close. It is right at the end. So comorbidities are elderly patient, female sex, coronary arteries, diabetes, smoker. These are the people who will have more chances of higher risk, not ACE or giving a statin. Next. So things to note about RAS, no evidence is that ACE inhibitors or ARBs is independently associated with COVID. They do not modify susceptibility to COVID. They do not do anything in the evolution of the disease, thereby affecting or converting mild to moderate, moderate to severe. It does not do that. So be at peace when you use these medications. Next. So need for patient education. It is necessary to educate the patients. Don't look at the newspaper, WhatsApp, television reviews, WhatsApp messages that should I stop these drugs? What is more important is you need to understand, please don't take on-the-counter medications, random unmonitored herbal medications, and keep a tab on prescribed medications. Take only prescribed ones. Preferably try and have a digital BP monitoring at home, and that should be calibrated with your clinic BP machine also, so that they don't give false reading either way, high or low, so that they don't have to, in COVID time, visit the hospitals unnecessarily. Next. So in summary, severe COVID infection is associated with adverse cardiac outcomes. ACE2 has a critical role, but does not have effect as far as medications. Triage system should be prioritized. Clinical presentation at hospital should be reported. Antihypertensive medication should be continued in the same dose for mild and moderate. ACE inhibitor is not a risk factor, and patient education will help to manage non-COVID patients effectively. I think I have finished in 22 minutes. Thank you very much for a patient hearing. We have the other 2 talks and then question answers in the end. In the end. The next speaker, please.
Yes, sir. With this, sir, yes, thank you very much for your nice presentation, sir. Now, I welcome Dr. Pragnesh Shah, is clinical cardiologist at Baroda only, and he is going to having the sessions on non-pharmacological management in hypertension, sir. So over to you, sir, please. Sir, you've been muted, sir. Please kindly unmute. Dr. Pragnesh, yeah, sir, please. Now I'm stop sharing, sir. Yeah, you can share your slide, sir.
Not here.
Now, sir, you can share your slide, sir.
Is it option is not there. It is there, but now there is no option of sharing screen.
Sir,
there is no option to share the screen right now. Seriously, the option is there.
Okay.
Hello. Hi, yeah. You need to allow me. You need to allow me to share the screen.
All right, sir.
Enabled, sir, already.
No, I'm not able to see here.
Sir, on a bottom, it is there, sir.
Yeah, previously you have said, but now it is not available. I am telling
Oh,
you.
oh,
Actually, there. It is not there.
okay.
Sir, in case you can send us the slide, we can operate for you.
Tell me your ID because previously I set my screen, but now it is not available.
हाँ, already आपने check करी ત્યારે it was available.
Yeah, it is available, but now it is not available. How can I share it now?
Sir, it is showing, मतलब all settings are there. You can share any point of time.
But now here is not available on my screen sharing options.
Is it so? Okay.
Can you, sir, log out and log in once again? Maybe
Oh, yeah.
once you can try that option, it will be there because it's showing here.
Okay, yeah. Okay. I will do this.
Yes, please, sir.
I will join again.
મને mute કર્યું.
Meanwhile, request to all the attendees, if they have any question, they can put it at the chat box. So at the end of the session, we can definitely request our speakers to answer for you. You can also unmute yourself at the end of the session and ask questions to speaker directly also.
If anybody has questions, they can ask me in between.
Yeah, sir. Please.
Mute કર્યું. AC mute.
Hello. Can you send me your email ID? I will share my slides.
Yeah, sir, it's
because here the option is not there to slides.
I'll just put it on the chat box so that you can easily get it.
Okay.
Good morning, Dr. Tripathi.
Good morning.
Sir, what is the scenario at present in between pregnancy strips? COVID test comes after say day or two or day at least 24 hours. What is the scenario acute MI? Whether the angiography is done immediately if it is required without waiting for the report of COVID.
That is where the protocol of HRCT has come in. What the cardiology people are doing is HRCT. HRCT shows a ground glass appearance. They will isolate the patient, look for the COVID test, treat conservatively.
ક્લિયર છે એટલું માં ક્લિયર નથી આવતું આમાં જેટલું ક્લિયર આવે છે સેમ નંબર છે.
But HRCT doesn't comes ground glass in initial days of infection.
Yeah, then if the infection is initial, not serious, and the patient is serious, then as per the triage, you can take also.
Because each patient may be positive, but CT may be normal.
Yeah, no, that is what I'm saying. If the patient is critical and cannot be conservative, he can be taken for an angio with all precautions.
Yes.
But if it is manageable, you treat conservatively, you wait for the COVID report and isolate.
In emergency, they are giving within 8 hours or so.
Yes, institution-wise, they are giving in 6 hours. For example, Bailal Amin, they have an in-house lab, so they give it in 6 hours. But if you send on an outdoor basis from somewhere, it is taking 24 to 48 hours.
Yes. In private, like Dr. Toprani.
Oh, it will take a long time, very long time.
Thanks, sir. Thanks.
Toprani, Divine, all, everywhere.
It will be double stressful condition.
Yeah. COVID is all about stress only. It is not about treatment.
Having MI,
Check your
having
email.
MI in a day.
You sent, sir? Yeah.
Yeah.
Just one.
Are we ready, Pragnesh bhai?
Yeah, I already sent my slides, sir. I don't know, they make some adjustment and I'm not able to share my slide
Yeah,
now.
I have received your slide, sir. I'm just downloading it.
Yes, please.
Give me a moment. Yeah.
Yes. Let me start without slide also.
Right, sir.
You just share my slides. In between, I will say something.
It's done, already done, sir. Just
Okay.
give me a second. Yeah.
Why this topic, friends? The already is booming around immunity, exercise, non-pharmacological measures to all the corona and other diseases. So that's why I think this is the relevant topic today. It's non-pharmacological management of the hypertension. I know what is your experience on daily or maybe twice or thrice a week. I received a patient. BP is 140/90, 146/94 or 150/90. And patient told, सब अभी रहने दो, दवाई चालू नहीं करनी है, एक बार चालू किया तो पूरी जिंदगी लेनी पड़ेगी. तो हम कुछ वेट एंड वॉच करते हैं, रेगुलर मॉनिटरिंग करते हैं, एंड अगर उसके बाद लगता है तो वी विल स्टार्ट द मेडिसिन. दिस इज द कॉमन response. And I don't know what is your experience, but this is a common experience for me, and I hope it is same for all of you. Next slide, please. Next slide, please.
Yeah.
So, in spite of this, all the proven data on effective BP control, there is a gap between awareness, treatment, and actual control. And we all know it well. Next slide, please. See, in just 2020, in this COVID era, all know. In this 2020, in COVID era, International Society of Hypertension give a statement that for the grade 1 hypertension, it means blood pressure between 140 to 159 and diastolic is 90 to 99. They are first offered lifestyle intervention like smoking cessation, exercise. Hello, there are some disturbance, madam. Smoking cessation. Can you please mute? Can you please mute?
Please mute everybody else except the speaker.
Can you please mute? I think Payal, you are open.
Dr. Bipin Patel's mic is getting opened again. So I request doctor to keep it on mute.
No, sir, I am mute already.
Okay, thank you. In this COVID era, in 2020 also the International Society of Hypertension give a statement that for the grade 1 hypertension, yeah, Dr. Bipin Patel, please. Dr. Bipin, Dr. Bipin Patel, please. Yeah, in this COVID era also, the International Society of Hypertension give a statement about grade 1 hypertension. It means BP is 140 to 159 systolic and diastolic 90 to 99. They give a statement that they should offer lifestyle intervention first. I think Dr. Bipin, if you are not interested, you can leave, please.
I think host has a power to mute all. Please do.
एक लेफ्ट राइट ग्लास बदला है if host
Sir, we are muting then, but again, people can unmute themselves. That's the problem we are facing.
Yeah, I will call Bipin Patel. So for that, they also advocate the lifestyle intervention. Bipin पे તમે म्यूट થઈ જાઓ, તમારું બહુ ડિસ્ટર્બન્સ આવે છે વચ્ચે. And it means they advocate smoking cessation, exercise, weight loss, salt and alcohol reduction, and healthy lifestyle or healthy diet for the period of 3 to 6 months. If there are no history of target organ damage, no history of diabetes, no CKD and cardiovascular disease. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Yeah, in 2017, American College of Cardiology and American Heart Association also published a guidelines on prevention, detection, and management of high blood pressure in the adults. And in these guidelines, they also recommended, next slide, the importance of non-pharmacological interventions. They recommended class 1 recommendation and level of evidence A for the weight loss, healthy diet, it means DASH diet, sodium reduction in food, and potassium supplementation if not in contraindication. Next slide, please. And increase physical activity and reduce or stop the alcohol consumptions. Next slide, please. They mean class 1 indication means there are strong evidence to benefit to follow all these non-pharmacological measures. And level of evidence, level A means there is a high quality evidence from more than one randomized controlled trial. Next slide, please. They also said that it is the best proven for prevention and treatment of the hypertension in grade 1 category of the hypertensions. They said that if you reduce weight in obese person for 1 kg, and so it will reduce 1 millimeter of mercury of high or systolic BP. If you follow DASH diet religiously, it means if you consume diet rich in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, low fat dietary products, and reduce content of saturated and total fat, it will reduce almost 10 to 12 millimeter of mercury of the systolic hypertension. If you reduce your sodium intake less than 1500 milligram per day, it will contribute to reduce 5 to 6 millimeter of mercury of the systolic blood pressure. And if you enhance intake of dietary potassium, if not contraindicated, it means if you eat diet rich in potassium up to 3500 to 5000 milligram per day, it will also contribute to reduce 4 to 5 millimeter of mercury of the hypertension. Next, please. And if you do physical activity, it means 90 to 150 minutes a week aerobic exercise. It means only brisk walking, or if you achieved your heart rate reserve 65 to 75%, it will also help you to reduce systolic BP 5 to 8 millimeter of mercury. And obviously, the alcohol consumption, if you stop it or make it in moderate quantity, it means they said there are 2 drinks per day for men and less than 1 drink for female. It will also reduce 4 millimeter of mercury of systolic hypertension. If now you can think, if there is young obese person having smoking, alcohol, and erratic diet pattern, and if he or she religiously follow this non-pharmacological intervention, and you multiply all that, DASH diet 11 to 12 mm of mercury, then exercise 5 to 8, then sodium, weight reduction, it's come around 20 to 30 millimeter of mercury of the systolic BP. It's a big figure. No single molecule can do it. So this is the importance of the non-pharmacological intervention. Next slide, please. In also clinicians sequelae flow chart of the management of hypertension, they also put lifestyle intervention before starting the medicines. Please, next slide, please. In 2019, American College of Cardiology and American Heart Association also said in the executive summary of the primary prevention of the cardiovascular disease. Next slide. They also again endorsed the 2017 statements of class of recommendation 1 and level A evidence for this weight loss, heart healthy dietary pattern, sodium reduction, dietary potassium supplementation, increased physical activity with structured exercise program, and limited alcohols. They keep it as a class 1 recommendation and level A evidence. Next slide, please. I think this is same they repeat, so we will not repeat it. Please change. Please, next slide, please. Next, please. Next, please. Next. This is the summary. What I already told. If you summarize all this, there's capacity to reduce the systolic blood pressure. It's come around 20 to 30 millimeter of mercury. Next slide, please. Let's see one few real practical cases. Mr. IS 36 years, BMI 24, chronic smoker, come in the OPD during executive checkup and his BP is 144/96. And he argues same thing, sir, I am not ready to start antihypertensive in this small age. So please give me a chance of some time to reduce the blood pressures. I advise him everything about lifestyle modification and all the exercise, dietary pattern, and advise some investigation also, and call him to follow after 7 days. And I strongly advise him to stop smoking and daily exercise. Please, next slide. And this is the record. He monitors his BP at home and it's around 40/90. Next slide, please. Next slide. This is his primary investigations. Everything is normal. ECG is normal. Echo is normal. No LVH. Renal functions are normal. Renal Dopplers are normal. Next, please. And just before 2 months, he religiously follow all the non-pharmacological intervention, and his BP is 124/80 with all normal parameters. So this is the importance of the non-pharmacological intervention. Next slide, please. In the other side, this is the same profile, almost same age group, 40 years male, chronic smoker, BP is 144/94, and he was also advised the same line of treatment. Next slide, please. He was also come with the record, almost same record. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. But his ECG is showing LVH. Next slide. And his echo is also showing mild concentric LVH. So it means that his BP is little bit chronic, and target organ is already involved. So we should we need pharmacological intervention in such case. So I have started tablet. Next slide. Next slide. Tablet telmisartan, and now he is absolutely fine. So the simple message is, you should know when to start non-pharmacological intervention and when to start pharmacological intervention. Next slide. So in short, this is the ABCD for the non-pharmacological management of the hypertension control. Awareness and education and attitude of the patients play important role. Body weight reduction is the key factor. Stop cigarette is also a important factor. Daru, no alcohol or minimize the alcohol consumptions. Regular physical activities. You need to follow food habits, that diet pattern. Going back to yoga, meditation to relax yourself and reduce salt consumption. Next slide, please. So many controversies and fights are there for treating the hypertension, but friends, to control BP properly is the more important. Thank you very much. Thank you, friends. I think it is 13-14
Yes,
minutes.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir. So thank you, Dr. Pragnesh Shah, for your nice presentations, how to approach non-pharmacological in the management of hypertension. Now our third speaker, may I invite and welcome Dr. Anant Marathe, Professor and HOD, Department of Microbiology, Parole Institute of Management and Science and Research, Vagodia. And doctor is going to have a sessions on lab diagnosis of COVID-19 principles, advantages, and its limitations. So, sir, over to you, sir, please.
Thank you so much. I think thanks for that introduction also.
Right.
It's my pleasure to be here. I have been in contact with the Association of Family Physicians and have been contributing to their regular publications also. So thanks for giving this opportunity to me. I would like to share my slides. So I'll go a little faster on this because we are already running short of time, and most of the people know what testings are available and what time does it take for every slide to every test to come. So results may take time. I'm just trying to share the slides with you.
Pampa?
So coming to the severe acute respiratory syndrome novel coronavirus 2, which is the causative agent of COVID-19, is a respiratory virus. So the route of transmission of this virus is basically person to person, and when a person talks or exhales, sneezes or coughs, he throws out the droplets virus, which can infect the other person who is in the proximity of that person. Most of the people know viruses, and they know the differences between the virus and bacteria, but let me reiterate, because most of the people have they are not from microbiology background. So let me tell you that viruses are ultra microscopic. They cannot be seen with the routine microscope that we use in the labs, and a single virus can infect even bacteria. So you can imagine viruses are very, very, very small. Viruses could be DNA viruses, RNA viruses. I'll go a little faster on this. Coronaviruses are not new. They have caused epidemics in the past, which were limited, like the SARS coronavirus 2003 and MERS coronavirus in 2011. So they have caused limited epidemics and then those viruses vanished. But this coronavirus is a novel coronavirus, and every virus is novel, but this is new coronavirus. Coronaviruses are single-stranded RNA positive sense viruses. And what does that mean? That this RNA, once gets into the host cell, can start transcription on its own and can manufacture millions of such viruses inside the host cells, which are then come out and infect other cells. So coming to the structure of this virus is an enveloped virus, which has got the RNA, which is very long RNA. The size of this virus is measured in nanometers, and we measure bacteria in micrometers, which is one nanometer is 1,000 part of a micrometer. So you can imagine how small the viruses or ultra microscopic the viruses are. This virus has RNA surrounded by the nucleocapsid, and there's an envelope which it acquires when it comes out of the host cell membrane. And these are the spike proteins. Now, these are the markers or the receptors which are very essential for this virus to get entry into the host cell. I am speaking about this because these proteins are unique for this virus, and there are some genes present on this RNA which transcribe, encode for these specific nucleoproteins, nucleocapsid proteins, as well as the spikes proteins. So I'll not go into detail about the symptoms of this viral infection because they range from asymptomatic to severely symptomatic patients. We know that they bind to the ACE2 receptors. Now ACE2 receptors, they are expressed on these cell surfaces, and the genes for the ACE2 receptors are present in every cell of human being, but they are expressed only on certain cells, and the expression of ACE2 receptors on the cell surface increases as the age, and this is the reason why this virus is not causing overwhelming infections in kids. So ACE2 receptors are mainly seen in the respiratory tract, in the GI, in cardiac tissue, in the lungs, in the kidney. So these are the major organs which are involved. The last thing is these ACE2 receptors are present on the endothelial cells also, and that is the reason why they interfere with blood pressure so much. Because these same receptors are used in the control of the blood pressure. So I will not go into the symptomatology, but surely because the symptoms, initial symptoms of these viral infections are similar to any other respiratory viral infections, it is mandatory to differentiate a COVID-19 infection from other viral infections. There are two types of tests which are right now available. The detection of RNA of this virus and the detection of some of the antigens present on this viral structure in a specimen. And the other thing is the detection of immune response to these viral infections by the body. So detection of antibodies against this virus. So coming to the detection of viral antigens or viral RNA, the tests that are available right now, the primary test, the one which has been developed in the molecular lab, is known as RT-PCR test. And let me tell you that RT-PCR is not a trivial type of test. It requires technical persons, a very good state-of-the-art labs, and it requires good infrastructure. I always feel that when some bad thing happens, good things come out of it. And as a result of COVID-19, every medical college is now having a molecular lab to test, COVID-19 RNA. We never had a molecular lab in most of the medical colleges in India, but after COVID-19, the ICMR and the medical association have been after the MCI has been after every college to have this. Coming to the test per se, the RT-PCR means the reverse transcriptase polymerase chain reaction. This is a very, very technically demanding test. And right now, these tests are done only in the labs which are ICMR enabled accredited lab, because a small mistake during the carrying out of this test can lead to false positive, false negative results. So they have been carried out only in NABL ICMR accredited labs. Even the test kits that are available have to get approval from the ICMR and National Institute of Virology, Pune. Coming to this test as it is, two types of samples are generally taken. One is an nasopharyngeal swab and the oropharyngeal swab. Now, ICMR has done a wonderful job in putting both these swabs in one, treating as one sample, putting it in the viral transport medium and sending it to the lab. In case of pneumonia, it was seen that many people may come negative in nasopharyngeal or oropharyngeal swabs. So in case of lower respiratory infection, sputum or lower respiratory secretions are better specimen like BAL. So because initial infection occurs in the mucous membrane of the oropharynx, initial reports should be done using the nasopharyngeal or oropharyngeal swab. The molecular test is most widely used is RT-PCR for COVID-19. The test involves, or the steps that are involved in collection of specimen, putting it in the viral transport medium, that is VTM, and send it in triple layer pack container to the lab. Once this comes to the lab, we extract RNA from the specimen, because the specimen may have the epithelial cells of the patient, the bacteria residing in the oropharynx or nasopharynx, and the other debris material. So RNA needs to be extracted from the specimen. The RNA is separated, and thereafter the RNA, entire RNA is never used, but the part of RNA, which is a signature sequence for some of the proteins which are specific for this virus, are then identified before the epidemic. We did not have any test to detect, and thanks to this technology of molecular labs, we have the test now available within very short period of time. I can remember when HIV epidemic came in, the first cases were reported in 1982, and the first serological test for detection of antibody against HIV was made available, in 1986. You can imagine what would have happened if the science had been slow in this epidemic. So the RNA then, the specific portion of the RNA are recognized, and they are converted into a complementary copy of DNA, which is known as cDNA. And then this uses reverse transcription, because reverse transcriptase enzyme, which converts RNA into DNA, is utilized, and that based sequence is converted into what is known as complementary DNA. And then this DNA is amplified. So in a thermocycler, we amplify this DNA. DNA, when taken to higher temperature, it dissociates. So that we know that structure of DNA, there are two strands, and they become separate. And then there are enzymes and the nucleotides which are there in the system, which are supplied. And this DNA then is amplified, brought to, again, 50 degrees, taken to the 90 degrees for separation. Again, the complementary strands are made, and there is exponential increase in the DNA material of the specimen, which is specific for the SARS-CoV-2. So two signature-based sequences are used at present. One which transcribes or encodes for nucleic capsid proteins, and the other one which transcribes for the spikes proteins, which are specific for SARS-CoV-2. Always we run a positive and a negative control along with this, and the reports are generated based on the fluorescent activity during amplification of this DNA, which is measured. And we call this because it plots a graph and we get these cycles. So after 25 cycles, if there was RNA in the specimen, the graph goes up. So this is known as CT or cycle threshold, which is generally reported in the reports for those who have been thinking as to what is CT value. So lower the CT value, the higher the concentration of viruses in the specimen. This can be used for the viral load in a specimen, but still it is not recommended to use the CT value for every person, because the virus shading is different in different individuals. So RT-PCR involves amplification of whatever specimen RNA was there. So it is more sensitive, more specific. It is 100% sensitive. So analytical sensitivity is above 95% and analytical specificity of this test is 100%. So because the amount of RNA in the initial phase may be very little, that's why false negative results could appear in those who have recently been exposed to this virus or those who are in the asymptomatic phase or pre-symptomatic phase. It is very difficult to decide somebody who is asymptomatic or pre-symptomatic, but it depends upon the time elapsed, because after 6 days, the pre-symptomatic will start developing symptoms while the asymptomatic will not. But initial phase, it is very difficult to decide. RT-PCR, because it amplifies the original RNA that was there, so it has more sensitivity and specificity. The other test that has recently come up and got the permission from ICMR is antigen testing. And there's a company called BD Bioscience who got the first approval for antigen detection in a oropharyngeal swab. This test involves taking oropharyngeal and nasopharyngeal swab, as we were doing for RT-PCR, and then putting that into the viral lysing medium, squeezing it in a tube, and then taking the liquid, using it as a specimen which is poured in a cartridge, which is a lateral flow chromatography, and if viruses are there, their antigen is then detected in a lateral flow chromatography with showing of bands. There's also a control band. Why the sensitivity of this test is lower? Because it does not involve amplification. So if there are enough number of viral antigens in the specimen, it will detect this. But this is very important test when the patient is symptomatic for more than, so the infection is more than 5 days old. So we can use this test. It can be used in some special conditions, like somebody who has come up with cardiac complications and we want to take him to the angiography, emergency angiography. You can do this test, antigen testing, which is a point of care test. And it can detect the virus antigens when the patient is symptomatic. And it is mandatory, if the antigen test is negative, then you have to confirm it with RT-PCR in a symptomatic patient. In a symptomatic patient, if you're doing it just for the sake of surgical investigations, then you need not go for RT-PCR. But there are no strict guidelines from ICMR for this purpose. But right now, some of the people are using it as a pre-surgical test. Because it happened so that some people who had come with other clinical problems and were taken to the surgical ward, they eventually turned out to be COVID-19 positive. And that's why it is very important to rule out COVID-19 for every patient that you admit in the hospital, because this virus is super infectious, very contagious, and can spread infections very fast. Coming to the another test that is available is the serological test, which measures the immune response and the antibody immune response against this virus. So we detect the IgG, IgM, and IgA, which we call it as the immunoglobulin total detection in a serum of a patient. we are all knowing that IgM is the antibody which is a marker of recent COVID-19 infection, and IgG is an infection which establishes the exposure to COVID-19. But unfortunately, in COVID-19 infections, the IgM and IgG, they appear almost at the same time. The body takes time to develop antibodies. So the antibodies are not seen and don't rise to detectable level in the serum before a week or two. So antibody test has that limitation. You cannot use it for acute infection diagnosis. So the test would be used. It can be done by ELISA, it can be done by rapid test, which has lower sensitivity, but it can be done by CLIA. This test per se can be used in a select category of patient. If the patient has some symptoms and who is tested negative for COVID-19 by RT-PCR or antigen test, in such people, you can still look at the serology. The second use of the serological test for detection of antibodies against COVID-19 is epidemiologic. It will give us an idea how many people are infected with this virus in the past, and we can also select the people who need vaccination once the vaccine will be available. So with that, I hand it over to the organizers, and thank you so much for giving this privilege to speak to my colleagues. Thank you so much. I am open for the questions and answers.
Yes, sir. Sir, thank you very much for your value-added information, sir. And yes, sir, there are few questions from the audience, sir. The question is from Dr. Yes, sir. There are questions from Dr. Ketan Shah. He's asking that embolism in main culprit of cardiac arrest in COVID-19 patient. So if so, then what is the pathophysiological reason for that?
I think this question would be for physician, but yes, as a microbiologist, I will try to answer this. And there are two theories behind this, because this virus binds to the ACE2 receptors present on the endothelial cells. It can cause type 2 hypersensitivity reaction there, and can cause complement fixation there, and involve something like endarteritis that is seen in many viral infections. And the other reasons is because we are yet to know. I think we know less than we don't know type 3 reactions which occur in some viral infections when there is high viral load in the serum and the antibodies binding it to it and causing immune complex mediated reactions. Because I have come across some patients with a lot of granular cast in the urine with COVID-19 positive. So this type 3 immune complex mediated reaction could happen. But because this virus binds to the ACE2 receptors present on many cells, it could cause type 2 hypersensitivity reaction too. I think it is a subject of research as to what actually causes this blockage of the small capillaries.
In addition to what Dr. Anand Marathe has said, there is a lot of inflammation going on parallelly. There could be a small pre-existing clot, or there could be a small atherosclerotic patch which could open up because of these pro-inflammatory markers, and that could cause the embolic phenomena to happen. As he said, these 2-3 things are there, but still we have not been able to pinpoint that this is the specific reason. So I think it's a combination of factors, and your D-dimer also will help along with the coagulation cascade. So let us hope that in coming times we might have a little more better etiology.
I would like to add that because viral sepsis is not known so far. We have been seeing only gram-negative septic shocks followed by the DIC. This is something new, and we have been trying to find out whether there is secondary bacterial infection after pneumonia which develops and causes sepsis. But most of the studies have failed find bacteria in the blood. So there is no chance of secondary sepsis, bacterial sepsis, which is causing this phenomenon. So it is the virus itself which is causing this. Thank you.
Yeah, Dr. Ashish Patel would like to ask something. Sir, please.
Thank you, speakers. Behalf of FPA, such a experienced persons with us to acknowledge regarding COVID. Thank you. Thank you all.
So another one question is from Dr. Gamit, that he is asking, can we consider COVID test by rapid test kit for emergency cardiac conditions, sir?
Yeah, that's why I said the ICMR has put guidelines, but they say that emergency, this test is a wonderful test and it comes positive if there is enough viral load in the sample. But the ICMR suggests that if the antigen testing, rapid antigen testing is negative, then you need confirmation by RT-PCR.
Right, sir. So another one questions from the audience, that CRP, ferritin, estimations, CBC to which day and to which day and follow up for monitoring. Give monitoring messages.
I think this is for Dr. Tripathi, who has been seeing patients
Right, sir.
and the
Right,
CRP
sir.
levels.
Number one, none of us know when the patient was infected. Number two, none of us know after infection what day he came to us. Number three, the data on indirect evidences of these testings. So what I understand from my experience over time is, irrespective of anything, get at least a ferritin CRP ESR hemogram done whenever you have an opportunity to see the patient. And then, depending on the patient's clinical condition, you serially monitor these data. If the patient has got symptoms, on my prescription pad I am writing कि तमने श्वास चढ़े, ताव उतरे नहीं, गला में तकलीफ थाय, loss of smell के taste बिल्कुल होए, then come back to the doctor or hospital, contact immediately, whether it is one day after my therapy or 2 days or 3 days. Then I will go for a serial CRP, can go for an LDH, go for a D-dimer, IL-6, whatever you want to. Yes, IL-6 D-dimer, once the patient is indicated, are better use for guidelines then. But at least ESR, CRP and ferritin, these three can be used anytime to serially monitor. Single reading does not mean anything. Patient could have a low serum ferritin because of anemia of even 12 or 11. So you do not trust it. Only look at the serial, which way it is going, and then take a call.
Right, sir.
I would like to add to this. The studies that have been done so far, they indicate that the CRP, which is a marker of inflammation, and those patients who have normal CRP, they generally don't go into severe disease. But those people who develop severe disease have high CRPs. The CRP can be used, along with PCT, as to know when to start an antibiotic in patients who have lower respiratory infections, because PCT, procalcitonin will tell you about the bacterial superadded infection. So it can be used as a guideline. After sepsis, D-dimer or those coagulation parameters can be used to start dexamethasone. So all these parameters can be used serially to identify as to what treatment modifications are needed. Right?
One thing I want to add is the polymorph lymphocyte ratio. Now this ratio has been a very critical for general practitioners. A simple hemogram ESR CRP.
What intervals are repeating monitoring કેટલા દિવસે કરવાનું? બે દિવસે કે એક દિવસે?
As needed upon the patient's clinical condition. If the patient is reasonably okay with your medication or without your medication or in home quarantine, without any problems, no major activities around him in the family or workplace, then you don't need to unnecessarily finger the patient. Only if the patient develops symptomatology, as I said, significant new symptomology or old pre-existing symptomatology which goes up, then you can ask after 48 hours onwards anytime.
Right, sir.
I think this CBC and ferritin and CRP is important, but monitoring the pulse SpO2, because in last 7 days there are 3 patients in my hospital succumb. They are completely all right during round time, almost before 1.5 hours or 2 hours. They are walking, chatting with family members, and suddenly there is a call from the hospital, sir, saturation 78 થઈ ગયું, 80 થઈ ગયું, 84 થઈ ગયું. So there are some underlying phenomena going on like thromboembolism, and they develop pulmonary embolism. And I think the better marker is D-dimer, and anti-pro-BNP is the better marker to monitor the patients, I think. Yes, Dr. Marathe, sir.
Yes, PCO2 is such a good thing, and people can afford to put one machine at home and can monitor. CDC recommends only measurement of oxygen tension the patient who is quarantined at home. So that's the best indication. Whenever it goes below 90, you have to contact your physician and take the steps.
Because personally I believe that CRP, all these inflammatory markers, their response are vary from person to person.
Yeah,
if
but
doctor
they are non-specific markers for inflammation.
Inflammation and
they're all non-specific.
They all are non-specific and vary from person to person.
Right, sir. So another one question from Dr. Nilesh Shah to Dr. Pragnesh Shah, that please kindly update about the heart rate reserve from 65 to 75, sir.
See, it's a heart rate reserve means it's basically nothing. You all know about what is the maximum heart rate and what is your resting heart rate. The difference between these two is your heart rate reserve. It means if you walk for 40 minutes, 45 minutes, 30 minutes, your heart rate should not raise more than 10 to 20% in first 5 to 10 minutes of walk. If you are not able to maintain your resting heart rate at the speed of 1.5 or 2 kilometers in initial warm-up period, then it means you need to do much more exercise and make your body fit to reserve your heart rate. So in short, it is the difference between your maximum heart rate and your resting heart rate.
Yes, sir. Another one question from Dr. Prabhat to Dr. Jay, sir, that should people who are on high risk to expose, they should continue with ACE or ARB or not?
If there is no proved symptom or test to guide you, or is showing specific symptoms of COVID or test, then please don't change anything. Even if you are highly exposed. Even if you are highly exposed and you have mild symptoms, proved COVID, you don't change anything. The problem only is in the moderate group of patients. You look at the following criteria: from in-hospital admission, oxygen saturation, demand of oxygen, demand of BiPAP ventilation, HRCT results. If any one of these three, and serum potassium, if any one of these are significantly progressive, showing a progression of disease and regression of patients, then you stop ACE or ARB. Till then, no change.
Right, sir. So any questions from the audience, sir? Please. Even you can unmute yourself and ask directly to our panelists, sir. Please.
Dr. Tripathi, then what they are giving of antihypertensive when they are stopping ACE inhibitor after in moderate cases? What they are giving for the antihypertensive?
Amlodipine.
Will it be enough?
You can go up to 20 milligrams if you want. If the potassium okay, you can add a diuretic. You can even use Arcamine. You can use metoprolol if the heart rate is not a cause. You can use everything except ACE and ARBs. All that we were using before ACE and ARBs came.
Right, sir.
Once the COVID is completed, patient recovers back, and he can put on again on the same dose of.
Yes. 6 weeks.
Yes. Thanks.
There is one study saying that you don't need to stop ACE inhibitor or ARB in walk-in patient in the OPD. If the patient worsen and patient needs admission in ICU or intensive care, then the intensivist decides to stop ACE inhibitor and ARB, because in mild to moderate patient, ACE inhibitor and ARB will prevent your cardiac issues also. There are already multiple studies saying that ACE inhibitor and ARB are cardioprotective. So in mild to moderate cases, I think there is no need to stop ACE inhibitor or ARB in the OPD basis.
As I said, the moderate is a very thin line, so we don't know which way it's going. So you monitor it in moderate and decide. Mild, surely no. Asymptomatic, no. OPD, no, don't change. Moderate, keep the parameters in patient's clinical condition and his biomedical parameters and take a call.
Right, sir.
Thank JB Pharmaceuticals and my co-speakers for having such a wonderful session. On behalf of all of my co-speakers, I thank the company and Family Practitioners Association of Vadodara to give us this platform, and hope we have many more in future. Thank you very much.
Right, sir. So just to update you that it is our approximate near about 9th associations with Vadodara Family Physician Association, and they've been always ready to share a platform with us. So I ensured you that even in future also we will continue such kind of good update sessions. Sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all, sir. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank
you, Dr. Anand, sir. Thank you, Dr. Pragnesh Shah, sir, for give us an opportunity with your association, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ketan Shah also, sir. Please.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. Have a nice day, sir. Please.
Thank you.
Yeah. With this, we are end of this session, sir. Thank you, sir. Yeah.